Clark for the win. Yes! Yes!
Steps back. Wow. Three-pointer.
College basketball. This is March Madness.
Good afternoon, sports fans, and welcome to the Flop Warning. I'm your host, Elias Corey, joined by some lovely guests. We have Owen Graham and Cole Nobby. Thank you to Riley Woodall, our in-studio producer. We're going to jump right into it. We've got a lot to talk about. The sun is shining here in Bloomington. Zach Edey's a Guangdong Tiger. Let's get going. I want to hear your guys' immediate reactions. We had two different Final Fours play out over the weekend. Cole, I'll start with you.
Well, immediate reactions, both games went kind of exactly how everybody expected them to go. It was almost, Iowa, I guess, that 10-5 lead, but both games were really like, okay, when is UConn going to just take away? When is South Carolina just going to take this away? And the Purdue game was really an absolute snoozer, honestly. Neither team could really hit. As an IU kid sitting there watching Purdue not be able to hit a shot was fun, but, UConn just kind of suffocated them the entire game. Purdue hit 1-3.
The entire
That's
game.
an IU number.
1 for 7 from 3. It was just both games were a little bit of snoozers, but the best team won, so that's all you can really ask for.
Yep.
I think the big story with, I guess, both they didn't really have a good maybe go-to second. I would say third option. I'll be a little kind to Braden Smith and Kate Martin for Iowa, but you got to look at it. Edey has 37, Clark has 30, Kate Martin was 16 for Iowa, Braden Smith a respectable 12. But Purdue, Braden's highest scorer was Lance Jones with 5 points. I think Camden Heide had 2. Fletcher Loyer may have had 2 or 4. But other than that, not a lot of production. So I kind of agree with Cole. Both games kind of went the way that a lot of people thought they were supposed to. I, on the women's show, said Caitlin Clark was going to take it away from South Carolina, kind of like finish the storyline of this season. But ultimately that happened, and I think Zion said it best. You win with a team, not just one player.
I'll say,
absolutely.
Braden Smith kind of made me eat my words all year, because last year I did not think he was very good at all. I think he was pretty much the main reason that they lost in the first round of FDU. This year, he's really been great all year. In the past 2 games, he has just looked like a true freshman, first 10 games point guard.
Yeah.
He could not physically, and I get it, Stephon Castle is a first rounder. He's a 6'6", athletic freak that defends the heck out of everybody. But he looked like, you are the starting point guard on a national championship team, and he could not get the ball from the out-of-bounds line to half court without 1 or 2 screens from whoever was taking the ball out. And then once he got it past half court, it was like, okay, I'm picking it up and I'm throwing it 8 feet in the air and hoping Zach Edey catches it and scores. So a lot of respect to Zach Edey for the way he played. Without him, they would have lost by 70. And that just really surprised me with the way Smith has played all year.
No, Edey had what, 61% of their points for the game? That's crazy.
Half, yeah.
But you mentioned the 3-point shot, and I think that's one that was actually really interesting about IU this year is the point distribution. Purdue is their best when they're able to have a sort of balanced point distribution between 2-point shots and 3-point shots. So yeah, Edey had 37, but that took how many possessions to do it? You only get so many possessions in a game, and if he's taking 20 possessions to get those 37 points, then that's not really a great efficiency margin. You know what I'm talking about? So yeah, definitely there are scores on that Purdue team that didn't step up. You mentioned Lance Jones with only 5. He's been so solid from beyond the arc this year. So kind of got to be disappointed if you're a Purdue fan looking at that in the box score. And this is Lance Jones's last game, correct? Because he was a grad transfer. Yep. Yeah. So they'll be looking elsewhere for their secondary scoring next year. Because I imagine it'll be Braden Smith. That's just it doesn't.
Yeah. Here's the thing about this, and we might touch on it later, I guess. But I think, first of all, way too early power rankings are
ridiculous.
The stupidest thing ever.
Especially with the transfer portal.
Yes.
What can you even guess?
Absolutely. But the fact that many people are looking at next year's roster and saying, okay, Purdue is a top 10 team.
Horrendous.
That is just not true. You have to take into account you are literally taking the best or the most productive player and the best player of men's college basketball.
You were right
out of
with
the
most
equation.
productive. Most productive is correct.
Okay, but either way, they're not accounting for that at all. And
Mhm.
I haven't seen a lot of Will Berg and their incoming freshman, who's also like 7 foot a ton.
He's 7'2". He's very good. I believe he'll start over Berg.
Yeah, but is he really going to come in and just do exactly what Zach Edey did?
I'll
Absolutely
say,
not.
and the weird thing is, if you really look at Purdue's roster there and like how they played this year, they're going to have to completely change how they play. Which Matt Painter's a great coach. I'm sure he's going to figure it out. But they're losing their 7'4" center, best interior defender. They're losing their best shooter in Mason Gillis. They're losing their second best shooter and best perimeter defender in Lance Jones. They're going to have to completely change how they play. And so I'm sure, give me, I don't know what their record is going to be after the first 10. I haven't looked at their schedule or anything. Give me the under on their first 10 games. I think sure they could figure it out. The Big Ten's probably not going to be that good. Wasn't great this year, but it's going to take them at least a third of the season to really figure out how to play without Edey just standing there in the middle of the paint every possession.
Yeah, and to your point, their like projected starting lineup has Trey Kaufman-Renn and Camden Heide as their front court. So again, unproven, definitely not, up there with Zach Edey, by no means necessary. It's just outrageous. They can't be top 10 worthy, especially this early of like next season. So.
6th in the nation was the ESPN way too early one. 6th in the nation. So a projected 2 seed without Zach Edey. And I don't think anybody can look me in the eye right now at ESPN and say this Purdue team without Zach Edey is by just breaking that down, that they'd be an Elite 8 team.
No.
That's horrible. Without Zach Edey, they really might lose that opening game to Grambling State. I'm not kidding. I mean, with Zach Edey, they lost to FDU.
It's fair.
It's
fair.
Looking at that way too early, what do you guys think? I mean, UConn, their way too early starting 5 right now is completely new.
Well, it was this year too, wasn't it?
Which
Klingon
started last year.
Yeah,
Klingon
for their 5s. No,
maybe
Newton,
Sunogo was
in.
It might be a completely new 5 this year, but yeah, UConn. I don't know how you really bet against him. I don't know how you bet against Dan Hurley at this point with what he just did.
There's an interesting situation going on with all that too, with Kentucky's opening job, which of course will kind of like transition into that. But Dan Hurley has been regarded as the kind of like second man in odds. Scott Drew's right now at first. There's been a lot of talk that he could be taking the job during the pod, which I've always dreamed of like having a podcast show where like live news breaks and we get like the immediate reactions. That could happen during this one, but obviously time will tell. But to your point, yeah, UConn, if they have a completely new starting lineup, it's also hard. But to have them at number 4, it's a little maybe not egregious, but it's a little too kind, I would say.
I think that rank might be more about Hurley.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Hurley's the kind of coach who can coach any lineup in America. I think if you swap coaches with any of those Final Four teams, I think no matter where Hurley goes, he's winning. In my opinion, I think Hurley's maybe the best coach in the country now, and I think giving him a new roster is just going to be giving him, a new challenge to try and prove it. I have a really hard time betting against him. I know he has a lot of haters with the way that he carries himself on the court, but I mean, you're getting results, so I really like that. And no, you're right, that Kentucky job opening is gonna create a lot of different sort of dominoes falling across the country, because I mean, Kentucky has 4 incoming 5-stars in this upcoming freshman class. Who knows who's going to hit the portal for them? I mean,
who knows who's going to go to Arkansas now?
Yeah, who's going to fall?
Yeah.
Who's going to be a sweet pig? And then, I mean, you've got Boogie Fland, who's I don't know about anything with Boogie Fland, but I mean, he was between IU, Alabama, and Kentucky, and who's another one of the front runners for that Kentucky job? Nate Oates. And he's maybe a little more of an outside shot, but I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff that we're going to see play out with that Wildcat team over the next probably week or so.
Don't forget about Billy Donovan.
Don't forget about Billy Donovan.
I mean that one makes the least sense, basically because he's trying to put Chicago in the playoffs right now.
Mhm.
So if any decision would come, it would be after that. But he's got the head coaching experience with Florida and stuff like that, so you never know. But going back to, I think, the head coaching stuff, Calipari to Arkansas was so out of the blue, and it felt like it happens like in a span of 20 minutes. Like I was live on Twitter and someone had just like mentioned it, like that it could happen.
Mhm.
I like refreshed a few minutes later. It was like, boom, it's done. So that is interesting to me because who was it before him? It was Musselman, and he went to USC,
Correct.
Southern California. So he'll be in the Big Ten. Then Calipari moves from Kentucky to take that job. So that leaves the Kentucky job open, which, of course, a bunch of candidates could take that job. But if you really think about it, this like kind of domino effect could continue to keep happening like farther into this month and maybe take a few months to even decide like a full set kind of job. I don't know what the word would be, but basically, I mean, this could be a while to where we get like a finalized version of head coaches across all the major conferences. So I like this time. I kind of like the transfer portal a little bit better, but it's kind of like college basketball finally has their own off season.
Yeah.
With the transfer portal and the coaching changes, I really like that.
Which it's a very love-hate relationship because
Yeah.
I've seen, like, looking at this, I'm on the way too early top 25, and it's like, if you have 2 or 3 guys coming back, you know for sure you're top 5. I mean, it's like Gonzaga brings back Nembhard, Hickman, Ike. They're like national title contenders immediately because you're just unsure about anybody else. Kansas is projected to have 2 transfers. UConn's a completely new starting lineup. Iowa State 2 transfers. Like everybody is just all new, and it's like a part of me just really wishes we had like some grasp on what was going to come. But I guess everything will fall into place.
I think, I mean, when you're talking about the portal, and I mean, obviously NIL and the portal is going to be really great for college athletes, right? Because they're going to be able to make money, and they're going to be able to explore new opportunities and get, a fresh start with a new team, and ultimately sort of advance their goal, if it is their goal of getting to the NBA. But I can't help but think that it's destroying mid-major basketball. That was something I was thinking about a lot this weekend, and specifically yesterday, looking at Indiana State.
Yeah, I knew you were probably going to mention that.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, in the span of about 3 hours, in Indiana State's entire starting lineup hit the portal. I mean, to me, that was a fringe top 25 team at the end of the year. They were ranked, like unofficially ranked like 28 in the AP and had been as high as 23 in the AP. And it's like they were stripped for parts, right? Because these guys now have the opportunity. There's no incentive for them to stay at a smaller program and actually build something cool at a mid-major. So yeah, every year we're going to get a mid-major team that maybe wins 1, 2, maybe 3 games in March, makes a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 run. You're not going to see an Elite 8 or a mid-major team, in the Final Four going forward.
So the only offer I have to rebuttal for that argument is Robbie Avila, which is probably the most notable transfer out of that kind of group. And of course, Schertz taking the St. Louis job. Robbie Avila, there's in the portal, you can have a no contact clause. So that basically means coming into the portal, he already knows where he's going to be. And it's, I think, been reported that Avila has a no contact clause. I don't know about the other few players.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only rebuttal I'll offer to that is when the coach leaves, obviously some of them are going to explore other options. But in the case of Avila, he's still kind of, I guess, remaining loyal to his situation. Now, obviously, it's going to be at a different program. And with Indiana State's culture this year, in terms of basketball, it's been one of the best we've ever seen. And it was obviously heartbreaking when they didn't get into the tournament and the Virginia Cavaliers took their place. But that's, again, argument that happened a while back. But I get the frustration, but also I feel like maybe the focus should be on the player wanting to play for the coach and not necessarily the location and NIL and stuff. Which I'm not too educated on St. Louis's NIL situation and how well their donors are and how that operates. That's kind of out of my pay grade for sure. But the Avila non-contact clause is something that definitely needed to be considered.
Sure. What I would encourage a lot of people against thinking about is that Robbie Avila is the only player on that team to hit the portal. Because he's probably the most notable.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, I mean, Xavier Bledson is almost certainly going to transfer. He was 6th man of the year in the MVC, but he's only got a grad transfer year yet. So I would imagine he also has a reasonable chance of becoming a Billiken. But I mean, then you've got Julian Larry, Ryan Conwell, who I would argue is an NBA prospect going forward. You've got Jason Kent, another guy who could make some noise in a Power 5 school. And there's just no incentive for them to stay at their school and actually build a program. And to your point about Avila wanting to follow Schertz, right? Schertz, in my opinion, would have stayed had there not been this huge emphasis on NIL and on the transfer portal, because he knows that just going to an A10 school like St. Louis is going to be able to afford him more NIL that he can offer to players. And so if that wasn't so heavily incentivized for players, I don't think it would be as heavily incentivized for coaches. And I think the best way to sort of remedy that is to incentivize staying at your home program. So what I had kind of thought of is that, like, right now, if you transfer twice in 2 years, well, you have to sit out for a little bit. And I think there should be something in place for that if you transfer one time, not as like a punishment, but just a way to say, like, yeah, you can play 20, 25 games if you go ahead and transfer this year, but you can play like 32 if you go ahead and stay with your program. And I think there needs to be something to get players to stay. And because otherwise you're going to ruin mid-major basketball. And some of these mid-major programs have some really awesome history, and we are going to totally lose that in March if that is not a rectification that's made.
And Riley just asked us the question. I don't know if we got that question from someone else or that was just you. But he said, does the transfer portal need to be regulated? I think the transfer portal needs to be regulated, and NIL probably needs to be regulated, because we're at the point now where they should be getting paid. Yes. It should be name, image, and likeness. If you're doing something for your name and image, you should absolutely be getting paid. But there should not be, like, there's stories of kids who come from a mid-major program and they're decent, and they look a high major in the face and they're like, $400K for me to come here. And it's like, why? It's like, it's just a pay to play thing now. And then I think the transfer portal, we went from going to, you could be a graduate transfer, you do your 4 years and then you transfer, or you could transfer for a year and sit out because you're like, I really want to leave here. Okay, sit out a year and then you can play. But now all of a sudden we went from that just to transfer whenever you want, do whatever you want, get paid whenever you want. And I think it just blew way too out of proportion immediately. And now you can never go back. I mean, imagine if the NCAA came down and said, okay, we're going to do it like you can only get paid a certain amount. You can only get incentivized stuff or just something like that. Then everybody would freak out and be like, well, I was already getting paid $1 million. Now you want me to go all the way down to $200,000 through the year. So I think it got way too out of proportion too fast. And I agree, it shouldn't have been you had to sit out a year. If your coach leaves or something like that, you should be allowed to go. But you shouldn't. I don't think you should just be allowed to leave whenever you want. And now these it's cool for the players that are on a mid-major and they play really well and then they get a shot to be a high major. But there's a lot of players that are suffering, especially high school recruits that are trying to fit in somewhere and sign early and everything. I mean, say you were a high school recruit at St. Louis or Arkansas or something, and then that coaching change happens and they say, sorry, I'm bringing in 7 kids that followed me from my previous school. You're a walk-on now. And it's like, it hurts a lot of kids.
It's like the Colorado football situation. In that kind of situation, if you put it into basketball. And another thing I'll comment on, like the NIL money space. I know I have the player pulled up, but I won't share it because I don't know if this is entirely true, but I heard through the same grapevine, potential Kansas money. I think he came to them asking for $1 million. They offered $750,000 and he rejected it. So that is just absurd. I'll take like a quarter of that.
Life-changing money.
Yeah.
And I can probably do better.
Nope, I'm good. But yeah, it's a weird space. I think it's still taking some adjustment. Riley pulled up another one that said, does the grad transfer need to be eliminated? That one I'm a little hesitant on saying it should be, just because I think grad transfers are usually meant for players that they know they're probably not going to have the best shot of making it to the league. So, if they want to take an extra year, make maybe a little bit more money and use, the grad transfer is something that is, like pulled into, I guess it's a part of the rules. So, they're welcome to do that if they choose to do so. So I'm a little hesitant on that. But
so next year will be, if you want that COVID year, next year will be the last year for anybody to have a COVID year, correct?
Yeah, for anyone to use it. So
after next year, the COVID year will finally be gone, where we have people getting medical red shirts, COVID years, transfers, and then now they're 27 years old and they're playing college basketball.
And then just like that, you've got year 9 of Xavier Johnson.
I didn't want to say names, but it came to mind.
Oh, I like X. I like X. He was around for a minute, wasn't he? All right, so we can sort of transition into a. Sorry, I was about to say transfer just because. Yeah,
Portal. Would have been a good one.
Portal on the brain.
Good one to say.
All right, then I'll
transfer into it.
Yeah, let's transfer into, some segments that we've been sort of working on the whole season. I want to hear. Let's get back to the Final Four. I want to hear what you guys had as like your fab of the week. Who performed really, really well this weekend? Open it up. It can be men's or women's. Who was your fab?
I'll take the reins on this one, because as a Bloomington native, you've always grown up to hate the other side. I'm
going to cut you off before you say that.
No.
I'm going to give you. I want to give you an opportunity to pick a talented basketball player.
Elias, he's talented. Okay, he has talent in
Zach
the post.
Zach Edey's bag is
it's
a Ziploc.
Not a lot, but
it's
it works.
A Ziploc.
It works.
It is a Ziploc bag. It is one of those.
He's a potential first-round pick.
It is a
potential. He's absolutely going to go.
He is.
I think anybody who takes Zach Edey in the first round wants to get fired. Because if you take Zach Edey in the first round, what do? You guarantee him a contract.
I will say this is a historically bad class.
I agree.
I think Zach Edey will go mid to late first round, and he'll be a backup center. And I don't think he'll be too bad.
I don't think he'll be. He may not average.
He's going to struggle in the pick and roll. We saw he's going to struggle with Jalen Hood shooting a pull-up jumper over.
Yeah, teams are going to.
But he moves well enough, and he's big enough that I think he'll be fine as a rim protector.
Moves well enough. He went through the NBA draft, combine process last year. One of the lowest raw athletic scores, like as far as lateral agility, ever. He looked over his right or left shoulder for a cone on his right. Okay, find that clip somewhere. It's hilarious.
Okay,
it's so funny.
How athletic do you really have to be if you're 7'4" with touch?
With
touch. He has touch.
With a wider.
He has touch.
All right, with a wider lane, okay, a bigger court where he's going to have to guard a center that is mobile.
I will say there is defensive 3 seconds.
There is a defensive 3 seconds.
It is different.
And he can't just sit in the lane anymore. He's going to have to actually get in and out because it's, significantly wider. People are undervaluing how much bigger the NBA court is and just how immobile this guy is. Do I think Zach Edey could be a very productive player in the NBA? Yes. Am I spending a first-round pick and banking on his development when I have to guarantee him a contract? No. I think Zach Edey would be a steal at the first pick in the second round. I think he'd be a waste of a pick in the first round.
So how do you say that though? Like, where do you pick him then? If he's a steal in the first pick of the second round, then
I just explained to you why. I think he should be the first pick in the second round because he does have some upside as just a raw defensive center, but I don't think you should guarantee him a contract.
He's projected on NBADraft.net right now to go 37.
Yep.
So
that's right around
I've seen Bleacher Report.
I've seen it up
as 20.
I was gonna say I've seen him up in close to the teens.
Okay. Bleacher Report, CBS, and The Ringer are not to be taken seriously when it comes to mock drafts.
Okay.
Just for the
I'm going to get back to what I was going to say as my fab of the week.
Tell us about Mark Sears.
Okay. Again, I've grown up to hate the enemy in Purdue, but I'm saying this the most in my years. You throw in Carson Edwards and he's close, but I'm talking about like pure just dominance. Purdue has in Purdue's history, I think Zach Edey is the most dominant player that I've seen growing up. And I got to give him credit. 37 points. He literally put the team on his back. he put the team on his back in the national championship. It didn't go his way, but you kind of have to feel a little bit for him just because of the year that he's had. I mean, the past 2 years he's had, AP Player of the Year twice. And the first year he couldn't even get it done in the first round. But, he made it all the way to the national championship. You got to give him credit. I think he will be productive in the NBA. I know Elias has a little bit of differing opinion on where he should be drafted, especially. But Zach Edey, it wasn't necessarily fun watching you play basketball, but it was cool to see how much he's grown as a player and physically and literally in basketball context. And I got to give him credit. Zach Edey, fabulous performance the past 2 games. Ultimately couldn't get it done, but kudos to him.
I completely agree, Owen. Love him or hate him. I lean towards the hate side, but you can't deny 25 and 15 a game at the highest level. My fab of the week, I got 2. I got one for the men's, one for the women's. My men's one is assistant coach Luke Murray for UConn. I read some interesting stuff about him. He's the son of Bill Murray, famous actor.
Did you not know this?
No, I did not.
He's bounced around coaching and stuff, and allegedly he is the mastermind behind the UConn offense and how they're able to just in and out every year, or I guess the past 2 years, run such a flawless offense with all the screens, all the openings and everything. Great. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would. You guys watch Space Jam?
Of course, I've watched Space Jam.
You know when Bill Murray says, "I don't play defense"?
Is that like a reference to his son or something?
That would be so cool.
Oh.
Like he's like, "Oh, I don't play defense," so his son was like, "All right, I'll be the offensive coordinator for the national championship team." I don't know. I thought that was cool, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
Or shout out to the entire UConn staff. I love Dan Hurley's comments after the game saying, "We don't care if Zach Edey has 45 points on 30 shots. We're just going to take everybody else away," and it worked flawlessly. On the women's side, I want to give a shout out for my fab of the week, Kate Martin. Overshadowed by Caitlin Clark, of course, but especially in that UConn game and the LSU game, she really showed out, and that they absolutely needed. She had 21 against LSU, 11-8 against UConn, and then 16 against South Carolina. Was really the only other player that did anything for that Iowa team besides Clark. So I think Iowa's sporting cast was a little bit underrated all year. They obviously weren't great, but I think they had some moments where you don't get to the national championship with just one player as good as she is. And so shout out Kate Martin. I thought she had a really good tournament.
I'll go ahead and do my fab for the women's game as well. Raven Johnson, if you remember last year, was disrespected by Caitlin Clark, not getting guarded at the 3-point line, and this time was tasked with guarding Clark the majority of the game. And 30 points is maybe considered a down game for Caitlin Clark in this situation, but Raven Johnson, just the jump from having that moment happen in the semifinals to kind of like overcoming that barrier and completing an undefeated season when guarding the best player in the league is good to her. So shout out to Raven Johnson. She gets my fab.
Yeah. No, great picks from you guys other than Owens. I think I'm going to have to go. I'm going to go to the women's side because I feel like people have, just kind of beat the Tristan Newton drum to death this year. He's a spectacular player, but I want to give the flowers to Camila Cardozo, who has had, just a spectacular season. And obviously went out with a bang, getting the win with South Carolina this year. And I think Cardozo already announced she's going to be going to the draft.
I believe so, and she's a top fiver, I believe.
Absolutely, and what a fantastic way to finish your career as a Gamecock. You're the best team in the country, and you prove it with an undefeated season. And I'll tell you what, she saved their undefeated season. If you guys remember the SEC championship game, Cardozo, the first 3 of her career, a straightaway 3 from the top of the key, banks it in, so she missed. It just went in, and finishes just great game all around with 15 points and 17 boards. 17 boards is wild. Camila Cardozo has just had a great year, a great career, and I think we're all really excited to watch her at the next level. And then somebody who's made the women's game, just infinitely more popular in the last couple of seasons. I think we've got to give some credit to Zach Edey for making the men's game so unwatchable that people have changed their channel.
I didn't say it was fun to watch. I said he had good performances.
He is statistically one of the most efficient players in college basketball history.
Yeah,
That is what I will say about him. That is what I will
think
say.
that's good.
I think it's great for statistics, but lots of players are good statistically.
Okay.
Back-to-back National Player of the Years, you won't be ever be able to take that away from him. I'll say that.
No.
I won't. And I am also one of those people who thinks IU should hang a banner this year that just says Purdue lost.
We gotta hang something.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Might as well.
It's been a while.
Get something in the rafters. However, I keep saying I'm one of those people. I'm also one of those people who thinks Indiana State might beat Purdue in a 7-game series.
Oh my gosh, Elias!
Which,
getting a
like,
little outrageous.
I'm joking,
You need
but
an
I'm
alarm.
also not.
You need like a soundboard that says
Because
an alarm.
Purdue's happy to let a team shoot threes. Indiana State likes to shoot a lot of threes. They're like top 10 in the nation in 3-point distribution. Let's take a sharp turn. This is where I'm happy to talk about Zach Edey throughout the rest of the season. Let's move to flop of the week. Who underperformed in your guys's Final Four analysis? If this guy had stepped up, or this women's player had stepped up, maybe their team does a little bit better. Who flopped for you guys this week? We'll start with you, Owen. Talk us through Fletcher Lawyer or Braden Smith.
Oh no, I was Fletcher Lawyer, and I feel like I don't really have to offer much description about it because he disappeared. It was like the first round matchup of FDU last season.
Yes.
He didn't want the ball in his hands. I don't really know what else you can say other than he wasn't there. And
it's hilariously funny to me that the week prior he said just how underrated his team was and how they've counted out their guards. What happened to their guards against UConn? Combined for fewer than 20 points, or was it 21 points?
it was,
Lawyer didn't score.
17.
Lawyer didn't
in the
score, then it was
championship
17.
game.
I inaccurately said I actually gave Fletcher Lawyer points.
Too much
He didn't
credit.
have any.
Too much credit for
Yeah,
Fletcher
2
Lawyer.
rebounds.
The only way to underrate Fletcher Lawyer would have been to say that he went over to the scoreboard and took points away from Purdue. Insane that he
flop.
felt so strongly that they had been underrated. Fletcher Lawyer.
Fletcher Lawyer should be the president of our flop warning podcast.
Yes.
Because
It should just be a picture of Fletcher Lawyer falling down
it
when
might be.
4'1" Zakai Ziegler walked into him and he flew all the way back to West Lafayette.
Yeah, nothing else to say. Fletcher Lawyer, 0 points. Coleman Hawkins, for some reason, gave him credit before the game. That just speaks to how Coleman Hawkins' year ended as well. So I'll say that. But
I think
Fletcher
Coleman
Lawyer-
Hawkins giving you credit might be worse than Coleman Hawkins saying you're bad at basketball.
That's true.
Hey, but that Illinois basketball team could be looking good next year. Could be looking
Could
pretty
be.
good next year.
AJ Storr.
Could be.
My flop of the week, I'll give Purdue a little bit of credit. I'll say that NC State and both the women's and men's side is kind of my flop of the week. I'll give the women's a little bit of credit because they had a great run and they just ran into an absolute wagon of South Carolina that you're just not going to win that game unless they have an off day. But we had so much built up for NC State where we thought, you know what? They have no pressure on them. Maybe they're the team to knock off a 1 seed. Maybe they could knock off UConn if they just got hot. And DJ Burns played 27 minutes and had 8 points.
No.
He had three.
So,
he had three
I-
fouls early too.
I mean,
yeah.
He was 4 for 10 with 1 rebound. And we all hyped up this matchup between him and Edey and the inside guys for NC State if they could pull something out. And Edey went 9 for 14 with 20 and 12. So I'll say NC State congratulations on both of them getting in the Final Four by an accomplishment by no small means, but just absolutely tanked once they got there. It was just all hype and nothing really to show for it once they got to the Final Four.
Yeah, no, love that. I think I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction, which is something I've found myself saying a lot this year. And I'm going to go with the Twitter officials that, like everybody who's been on Twitter this year talking about how bad the officials have been, namely these last couple games for UConn. And I'm not talking about the men's Final Four matchup and men's championship matchup. I'm talking about the men's championship matchup and the UConn-Iowa matchup on the women's side in the Final Four. People comparing these 2 illegal screens, the one screen by Zach Edey, which I actually think was clean, and then the one screen set by Aaliyah Edwards. people just going at it, watching the exact same video and saying opposite things, I find so funny because I feel like you can't watch that Aaliyah Edwards screen and think that it's illegal or think that it's legal. I mean, she
the
was
two
ruled
hands
Yeah.
100%
made it
legal
official.
or
I mean,
illegal.
She could have got away with it, I think, if she just left her hands down. But then once you bring them up and start to
Yeah.
extend them,
And I think in the first 3 quarters that might not get called. Or no, I think in the first 3 quarters nobody has a problem with that getting called. But the moment in which it got called, I think that's why people have had such a big issue with it. And then my only issue with the Edey screen, because I thought that's one of the better screens you're going to see set this year. My issue was Braden Smith pushed him into the screen, and so it looked much, much worse than it was. And then there's sort of, if you watch the clip, Zach Edey sort of discards him. And, Riley's holding up his phone right now, indicating to me that you can't decide a game on that. But
It's the right call.
does that call in the first quarter instead not inherently decide the game? If that call's made at a different point in the game, the score is different going into that last possession. So, yeah, I think it looks on TV like the referees decided that game by giving the ball back to Iowa, not giving UConn a chance to score. But what decided the game was really setting an illegal screen, because that could have been a legal screen. You can do that just fine and get away with it. You can even set a slightly illegal screen in that situation and then probably be good to go. So, no, I think Aaliyah Edwards made a mistake, and I think it's in poor taste for UConn fans to be on Twitter right now ranting about how horrible of a call that was, when realistically it's a foul.
and I do agree. You want to see the players played out, and we always want the game to be decided on the court. But man, if it's foul in the first quarter, it has to be a foul in the fourth. Or then it's just then it's inconsistent, and then it's just you're changing the game still.
Yes.
So,
And the narrative would be totally flipped had it not been called. It would be UConn got handed a chance to win this game, especially if UConn went out and won that game going forward.
yeah.
The whole narrative is now Caitlin Clark should have been in a national championship. She should have had the opportunity to dethrone Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks, but instead UConn was allowed to set this illegal screen, and Paige Beckers came off the screen and hit a 3. The narrative totally flips. And I don't know. I think just obviously it sucks, and it's to see a game come down to a foul. But if you think about it, close games always come down to a foul, because it's fouls that happen in the second quarter still, like, they have an effect on the rest of the game. It's just that this one happened at a really, really unfortunate time for the Huskies, and what a great season they've had. But yeah, no, the Twitter refs need to stop. I've seen a ton of that with Zach Edey. I mean, he gets hacked so often, and people are so quick to get on Twitter and say that's not a foul, or they'll be so quick to get on Twitter when he doesn't get hacked, but then they're very quiet when he does. And I just think, the referees are human. They're going to make mistakes. Let it happen. And I've definitely been a perpetrator of this sort of referee hatred on the social medias. But, it in the case of Aaliyah Edwards, that's an illegal screen. Let that be an illegal
It's
screen.
always the easiest person to blame is the refs.
Yes.
You can't blame anyone on your team, so you point the blame at the refs. So
Speaking of which, what do you guys think about all of this sort of drama that's gone down between Dan Hurley and Zach Edey? Because the story I've heard,
I'm not aware of this.
Oh my gosh.
I might.
It
It might
was
come to mind. but-
immediately after the illegal, or the not called illegal screen, the screen by Zach Edey, which again, this honestly pains me to say, but I do believe that was legal. I think Fletcher Lawyer pushed him into the screen, so I think maybe an offensive foul on Braden Smith. But no, I don't believe it was an illegal screen set by Edey. Edey had apparently been, chirping the UConn players pretty relentlessly, and then as Hurley was talking to an official about that illegal screen, Edey started jawing with Hurley, and then the clip picks up with Hurley walking out and sort of, giving that back to Edey, and it has sparked so much debate on social media about, should a coach be approaching a player like that? Dan Hurley should have been thrown out, and Edey's just trying to, get away from him and go to his timeout, and it's so funny to watch, because Edey, you look at him and he seems like a relatively soft-spoken guy, until like the moment hits in the game and he is fired
It's hoops.
up. And so seeing them kind of go at it was really interesting for me.
It's hoops.
What do you guys think?
It's a different way. It's a different world on the court, man.
Yeah.
I've sat pretty close to some games, and it's an entire different world.
And I think whoever you root for, if Purdue would have won that game, there would have been a million Purdue fans saying, "Oh, look at Edey talking trash to Dan Hurley," and then backing it up with the win.
Mhm.
But now all the Purdue fans are mad because Hurley talked that trash,
Yes.
and then they blew him out. And I think people just don't like Hurley because he's super passionate, super, not afraid to talk trash, not afraid to, believe in his players. Like he had the quote a couple years ago with "You better get us now," and then now how good they are. And I think, it's just a little bit of jealousy, I guess. I wish that was our
Yeah.
I wish I was a
Oh,
UConn
yeah.
fan and that was happening, So I think it's just whichever side you're on.
Yeah, no, Dan Hurley has this aura around him that he just exudes confidence in his team, and it's a very authentic confidence because you'll see coaches that go on interviews and say, "Oh, we can beat anybody. I believe it." They don't always, and I think Dan Hurley really believes his team can go out there and beat any team in the nation, and I think he really believed that going into this season. And they went out and they proved it. Only 3 losses on the year. One of them to a Seton Hall team that barely squeaked by Indiana State in the NIT championship. So really, Indiana State played.
What are you about to say?
Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't
So
do
hear
this.
me out.
Don't do this.
If Indiana State loses by they lost by 2 to Seton Hall. Seton Hall beat UConn by 15. Indiana State beats UConn by 13.
UConn also beat Seton Hall by like 30 the second time they played.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about that. All right, well, guys, I think it's about time that we wrap up, but we have just one more segment. Okay, sorry, we had an impromptu visitor into the podcast studio, but we've got just one more segment before we wrap up for the day. It's my favorite. We are going to get into shot clock. Okay, I know.
Really intense.
Yeah.
I know I've got a lot to say. I know Cole's got a lot to say. I know Owen's probably really excited to hear what Cole and I have to say.
Yeah, I've got nothing prepared. You're actually right on that. I have
when a
nothing
little
prepared.
kid gets to
I
sit at
can
the
go
grown-up
first if you
table.
want to think about it.
Yeah, I have to think about it. So
Yeah. All right. Riley's got our timer. All right, Cole. Let me give you. Riley, why are you counting him down? I'll count him down.
he's in a rush.
My gosh. Yeah. Riley's ready to get home. All right. Cole, we're gonna get you started in 5, 3, 1, go.
I don't really have much to say. I'm just going to repeat what I said last shot clock. This UConn team is one of the best of the decade. People just, that's recency bias. No, it's not. They lost 3 games. They dominated the tournament for the second year in a row. Throw them up right next to that 2018 Villanova team. This is one of the most consistent, best teams we've seen in a while. And I think in 10 years from now, we're going to be looking back going, yeah, they were.
Absolutely.
I would agree with you. Yep.
And that's the end of Owen's shot clock.
Relax. Okay. I have an idea of what I maybe want to do. It's kind of just going to be me rambling, and with not a lot of data or thought to back it up. So I'm ready, but Cole, I do agree with you.
All right, Owen, we're going to get you started. Let's get weird in
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
I think that we're at a point in college basketball where Indiana's undefeated season will remain the lone undefeated season because of how competitive and how much, talent is in the space right now. I just can't see a team being that dominant for an entire year, going all the way, not losing a game. So credit to Indiana also, but obviously it's a little bit biased, but I don't think it'll ever happen ever again in men's college basketball.
Credit to Indiana for
We're-
something they did 50 years
We're
ago.
not putting any
shout out.
hot takes out here because I completely agree with that too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Like you just said, they got beat by Seton Hall by 15 earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Like, would you ever expect this? If UConn and Seton Hall played on neutral court tomorrow, they would probably win by 30. But
Yeah.
that happened early in the year. So
Really with college basketball, we're seeing the floor of the player pool just get exponentially higher year
That's-
by year.
That's what I was trying to say, but
Yeah.
I didn't really say that as well. So,
I think we're approaching a time in college sports where anybody can beat anybody, which is, just so much more exciting for the game. And that's why I think there's a lot, like the argument holds a lot of water that we should expand expand the NCAA tournament field, but that's not going to be my shot
Which
clock today.
is the positive. There's a bunch of negatives of the transfer portal. That's the positive
Yes.
of NIL and stuff is now that everything's kind of evening out where you don't just have these teams where it's like, I'll be the backup for 2 years because I know this team's going to win a championship at some point. Now it's kind of even.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm ready. Riley's give me a 3, 2, 1. All right, I just want to one last time pay homage to the Indiana State Sycamores. I've beat their drum so much this year, and it really is disappointing to see that whole team sort of disband because that lineup brought so much joy to mid-major basketball this year. One of the most efficient teams you're ever going to see. Josh Schertz really had that offense humming, only taking layups and threes. Just really cool to watch the way that Naismith intended it, and it's really sad we're not going to get to see those guys together anymore. Was I under 30? Let's go.
Wow.
Nice.
Dude,
Perfect.
is that back to back, or is that?
You
I don't
were
know
under
if it's back
30
to back.
last
Was
time,
I? I think I went kind of
Monday.
short last time. I think I was like,
You
yes,
did, yeah.
because I was 24 and I said we should add it to my next time.
Didn't even
Yeah.
need it.
Wow, excellent. All right, guys. Well, I've had a lot of fun really going through this tournament with you guys. It's been a lot of fun, and now we move into a really chaotic time of basketball because with the outset of NIL in the portal, there really is no off season for college sports, and there's no off season for the shot clock. So we're going to be back next Monday, getting back into the rhythm of the Men's Monday show. And I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. But for now, that's all from Elias Corey, Cole Nobby, Owen Graham, and our producer, Riley Woodall. That'll be the end of the shot clock this week. See ya.